Hello everybody, in this video series I'm going to be showing you how I made this Roubo Workbench. Okay, so leg stand together, end cap joinery almost complete. Now I've just got to do the dovetails on either corner. So I've clamped it to the edge of the workbench, then I marked on the base lines and marked a cut line further up as well. The dovetail layer is added on after I have dropped the top onto the leg stand, so that is the final layer there. I'm marking the cut line now. I've tried explaining this about 5 times now and I can't do it effectively, but I'll do my best attempt this time. That back socket I have cut 1mm too deep. The reason for this is when I drop those 2 slabs onto the leg stand, if they're a little bit closer than I anticipated, it would mean that the baseline of that socket would stick out proud of that second to last layer, and I wouldn't be able to push the final layer right up against that second to last layer because the bottom of the socket would be preventing it from bottoming out. Probably made no sense whatsoever, but there was a reason for it. It's just to give a little bit of flexibility front to back. It doesn't really affect the strength that much because that's an end grain to long grain joint, so there's not a lot of strength there. The main strength in dovetails comes from the wedge shape. It's not whether it bottoms out with the socket or not. Here, I used some of those offcuts to plug that massive bit that I accidentally drilled out. So that was good. Planed that to width, shoved it in, glued it in place, plugged it. You would never even know unless you watched these videos. So onto the dovetails. Now, like I said, the final layer of this workbench is added after the top has been dropped onto the legs. So here, I'm cutting them quite oversized and then mark out all the dovetail joinery ready to be added on later. So firstly, I mark the depth that I want to go into the end cap. Here I chose to leave about 10mm at the end. And using the same setting on the marking gauge, I then transferred the baseline across to the tails on the final strip. Now here I'm marking the baseline of those sockets using the marks that I created earlier. Now houndstooth dovetails are unique because you have 2 baselines for them. So I worked out the distance halfway between the tails, marked a second baseline, and then worked out the spacing that I needed for the dovetails and marked them out using a sliding bevel and a 1:8 ratio, I think is what I went for in the end. Yeah, 1:8. Now, I don't know about you, but cutting dovetails in 1.5 thick material didn't really sound that appealing, to be honest. So I thought I'd try my hand at cutting them on a bandsaw. Not sure you can try your hand at cutting something on a machine, but oh well. So I was cutting a 1:8 wedge there, and now I'm adding a little bit of sandpaper to the side using double-sided tape, and this would just help grip the wood against it as I'm using it as a wedge and prevent it from slipping ever so slightly. So here we go, with the wedge against the fence. That gives me the perfect angle and keeps all of the cuts nice and square. It was really nice doing it this way. I need to force myself not to do this in the future because I do want to be able to continue doing it by hand, but for this, perfect. It was lovely. dovetails all cut and clean up, I then had to mark those tails onto the end cap. Got to be so precise here, because if I chop that end cap up and make a complete mess of it, I have to start all of that whole process again, which would not be fun. So as you can see, I used a massive drill press to hold it in place to make sure there's no side-to-side movement. Got it all square, got it all flush on the edges, and made sure there's no risk of that shifting. None at all. Because I've never cut houndstooth dovetail before, and I watched a video on it about a year and a half ago, I have no idea how to actually mark these baselines. So what I did was get the flashlight on my phone so I could see what I was doing, went down into there with the chisel, gave myself a little prick, and then got the marking gauge and scored that line a little bit deeper just so it's a bit more prominent. My plan with cutting out these sockets was to take everything down to 1mm off the final marking lines, resharpen all of my chisels to get them beautifully sharp, and then take that final cut and get it all completely pristine. So here I'm sitting to the side of the wood so that you can see when your chisel's at 90 degrees. It's just a nice little trick that you can do to make sure that you don't accidentally start undercutting or overcutting, I suppose. And there's the finished result. They're alright. The baseline on the second dovetails had a small gap there that I wasn't too happy with, but I can fix that later, so that's all fine. In the next video, I think I'll be attaching the top. So yeah, see you then.